one of the biggest bank heists in history unfolded in plain sight, without a single alarm triggered or gunshot fired. December 20th, 2004, on a chilling evening, as Belfast city center bustled with holiday shoppers, a daring crime was set in motion. One that would leave authorities baffled for years to come. How did a group of criminals infiltrate the Northern Bank's headquarters and vanish with an astonishing £26.5 million? Who masterminded this meticulously planned heist, and what became of the missing fortune? Was it merely a case of organized crime, or was there a deeper, more political motive at play? In the early 2000s, Northern Bank, located on Donegal Square West in Belfast, was one of the most well-known financial institutions in Northern Ireland. It held a special status as one of the few banks allowed to print its own banknotes, making it a key player in the region's economy. As the holiday season of 2004 approached, the bank was busier than ever. With Christmas just around the corner, customers were withdrawing cash for gifts, shopping, and celebrations. To keep up with the festive rush, Northern Bank stocked up on extra cash, ensuring there was enough money flowing through its branches. But while the bank was focused on serving its customers, something far more sinister was unfolding behind the scenes. A group of criminals had spent months crafting a daring and sophisticated plan, one that would take advantage of the bank's increased cash reserves and go down as one of the most shocking heists in history. As the clock ticked closer to midnight on December 19th, 2004, the carefully orchestrated plan began to unfold, plunging the lives of Kevin McMullen and Chris Ward into chaos and marking the start of a heist that would shock the world. On the night of December 19th, 2004, two North Bank employees, Kevin McMullen and Chris Ward, were about to experience a nightmare they could have never imagined. As they went about their usual routines, armed men posing as police officers arrived at their homes, setting a terrifying plan into motion. Chris Ward, a bank official, was at home in Colin Mill Polglass, a quiet neighborhood on the western outskirts of Belfast. Inside the house with him were his mother, father, brother, his brother's girlfriend, and another sibling. Suddenly, three masked men burst in, armed and ready to take control. The intruders immediately made it clear this wasn't just a robbery. It was something much bigger. With guns pointed at them, Ward's terrified family was told to remain silent. At least two of the masked men stayed behind to keep watch over them, while Chris Ward himself was forced into a red car and driven away. His destination? The home of his supervisor, Kevin McMullen. Meanwhile, another part of the gang had already reached McMullen's house, using the same deceptive tactic, posing as police officers. When McMullen and his wife, Karen, answered the door, they were immediately overpowered. The criminals tied them up at gunpoint, making sure they had no chance to escape or call for help. By the time Chris Ward arrived, the gang had already taken complete control of the McMullen home. He was pushed inside, only to find his boss, Kevin McMullen, restrained and visibly shaken. The attackers weren't just holding them hostage. They had a much bigger plan, and both men were now essential to pulling it off. Knowing that they needed McMullen to comply, the gang took a horrifying extra step. They grabbed his wife, Karen, and drove her away to a secret location, deep in a freezing forest south of Belfast. She was blindfolded and left there, completely unaware of where she was or what was happening to her husband. The message was clear. If McMullen or Ward tried to resist, their loved ones would suffer the consequences. Throughout the night, the masked men kept both hostages under constant pressure. They interrogated McMullen, demanding security codes for the bank's vaults. As one of only 9 people in the entire bank with access to these codes, he was a key piece in their plan. At the same time, the gang kept close communication between the two locations where the families were being held. Every moment, McMullen and Ward were reminded that any sign of defiance would put their families at immediate risk. The night of terror had stretched into the early hours of December 20th, 2004, leaving Kevin McMullen and Chris Ward exhausted and traumatized, but with no choice but to play their part in the criminals' meticulously planned heist. The morning started like any other at Northern Bank's headquarters in Belfast. However, for two employees, Kevin McMullen and Chris Ward, it was anything but normal. Held hostage the entire night before, they had no choice but to follow the robbers' orders. With the criminals monitoring them through mobile phones, McMullen and Ward arrived at work on time and went about their day as if nothing was wrong. No one suspected that behind their usual routines, a multi-million-pound robbery was unfolding right under their noses. As the bank started closing for the day, the most critical phase of the heist began. Under immense pressure, McMullen and Ward led the gang members to the bank's underground vaults, the very heart of the Northern Bank's cash center in the basement at Donegal Square and Wellington Street. Using their high-level security access, they unlocked the vaults, revealing stacks of cash. The robbers didn't even have to break in. Their hostages were handing them the money themselves. One of the gang members, posing as a regular worker, walked out of the bank carrying a hold all filled with £1 million. Once outside, he casually turned into Upper Queen Street, where he handed the bag to another man. This wasn't part of the main robbery. It was a trial run, a test to make sure everything would go smoothly when they stole the real fortune later that evening. A sports bag stuffed with £100 and £50 notes was passed to a gang member outside, a chilling rehearsal before the grand execution. At 7 p.m., the first phase of the robbery took place. A distinctive white box van pulled up to the Wellington Street entrance. McMullen and Ward, still acting under duress, loaded crates filled with cash onto trolleys. They were then sent back to the vaults to load 24 green boxes of new money onto more trolleys, pushing them towards the loading bay where the waiting vehicle stood. The haul was staggering, £10 million of uncirculated Northern Bank sterling banknotes, £5.5 million of used Northern Bank sterling notes, £4.5 million of circulated sterling notes issued by other banks, smaller amounts of euros and US dollars. To avoid suspicion, they had been instructed to call security, telling them that they were simply taking out the rubbish to be collected by a delivery service company. Everything was planned down to the last detail. When the van arrived, we were shocked when two of the gang members got out dressed in the delivery service uniforms and fleeces. They were wearing hats and fleeces, Ward later recalled. With no reason to question the operation, bank staff paid no attention as the supposed delivery men loaded the boxes onto the van. An hour later, the van returned for a second collection, this time picking up even more cash from the Wellington Street entrance. By the time it drove off towards the Grosvenor Road roundabout, £26.5 million had been stolen, one of the largest amounts ever taken in a bank robbery in UK history. While millions of pounds were being driven away, Karen McMullen, who had been held hostage for over 24 hours, was left abandoned. Disoriented and suffering from exposure to the freezing temperatures, she managed to find her way to a nearby house. Later, police discovered that her car had been set on fire and left burnout in the forest park. One final attempt by robbers to erase any evidence. The robbers never once stepped inside the bank, never fired a shot, and never raised suspicion. With McMullen and Ward forced to cooperate, they had managed to walk away with millions without breaking a single lock or triggering any alarms. As the robbers disappeared into the night with their staggering haul, the Northern Bank remained eerily unaware of the massive theft that had just taken place, until the chilling truth began to unravel hours later. The alarm wasn't raised until 11:45 p.m. on Monday, long after the robbers had vanished into the night. At first, no one fully grasped what had happened, but by the next day, December 21st, reality hit hard. As bank officials began their routine checks, they quickly realized something was terribly wrong. Millions of pounds were missing. Stunned and scrambling for answers, the bank's management wasted no time in alerting law enforcement. The numbers were staggering, £26.5 million gone without a trace. It was one of the biggest bank robberies in UK history. News of the heist spread like wildfire, shocking the financial world and the public alike. How had such an audacious crime taken place right under everyone's noses? The sheer scale and precision of the operation left no doubt. This wasn't the work of amateurs. The hostage-taking, the fake uniforms, the seamless execution. Everything pointed to a highly organized gang with experience in pulling off major crimes. Investigators quickly realized that the timing of the robbery wasn't random. In the lead-up to Christmas, Northern Bank was handling enormous sums of cash. Businesses were making large deposits, cash machines needed to be stocked for the holiday rush, and newly printed banknotes were being sorted and prepared for circulation. It was the perfect moment to strike. The gang had planned every move to perfection. They knew exactly when to act, how to avoid raising suspicion, and how to vanish without a trace. But now, the biggest question remained. Where had all the money gone? And who was behind the heist of the century? The staggering scale of the heist and mystery surrounding the stolen money left investigators with a daunting task, unraveling the web of a crime that seemed almost too perfect to solve. The police service of Northern Ireland wasted no time launching a massive investigation into the daring heist, fully aware of the potential political and social consequences. The sheer scale and precision of the robbery pointed to a highly organized group, one with the resources, intelligence, and experience to pull off such a bold operation. As detectives worked around the clock, multiple leads began to emerge. The first major breakthrough came when a portion of the stolen money was discovered in a house in County Cork. This led investigators straight to Ted Cunningham, a financial advisor who quickly found himself at the center of the case. He was arrested and charged with money laundering, and further digging into his connections revealed links to various individuals, some of whom were suspected to having ties to paramilitary organizations. Despite these significant developments, the masterminds behind the robbery remained just out of reach. The police knew they were dealing with a well-coordinated group that had planned every move meticulously, leaving little trace behind. The moment news of the robbery broke, senior officials at the bank and law enforcement were thrown into crisis mode. Alerts were sent out, and high-ranking officers rushed to assess the situation. Sam Kincaid, the head of the PSNI's Crime Operations Branch, was among the first to be briefed. Kincaid immediately gave the order to launch a full-scale manhunt for the gang responsible. Roadblocks were set up, surveillance was intensified, and forensics teams combed through every piece of evidence. Detectives began reconstructing the timeline, analyzing CCTV footage, and interviewing potential witnesses in hopes of uncovering crucial details. As the investigation unfolded, tensions grew. Political figures weighed in, the media followed every development, and the public watched anxiously, wondering if the police would catch those responsible. Would the thieves slip away into the shadows, or would justice prevail? As the investigation deepened, the question of who was behind the heist became not just a matter of criminal justice, but a political lightning rod, sparking intense debate. Many, including the police service of Northern Ireland and the British and Irish governments, pointed the finger at the Provisional Irish Republic Army. Officials believed the stolen money was meant to fund IRA operations and support the political activities of Sinn Féin, the party closely linked to the Republican movement. One of the strongest voices supporting this theory was Michael McDowell, Ireland's Minister for Justice at the time. He openly stated that the stolen funds were intended for Republican projects. His remarks added fuel to an already heated debate. The robbery didn't just shake the banking world, it sent shockwaves through the fragile peace process in Northern Ireland, threatening to derail years of political progress. Sinn Féin, however, completely rejected the allegations. The party insisted that neither the IRA nor any of its officials had been involved in the robbery. They called the accusations a deliberate attempt to sabotage the peace process. As blame and counter-blame filled the air, the political atmosphere grew even more tense. The hunt for the gang dragged on for weeks and then months, but no clear answers emerged. Meanwhile, pressure mounted on law enforcement to identify the culprits. Sir Hugh Ord, the PSNI chief constable, eventually released an interim report that directly blamed the IRA for orchestrating the crime. However, he strongly denied that his findings were influenced by political pressure. These cases are extremely complicated, Ord explained. The robbery itself was carried out by a competent group of criminals. This was a particularly brutal crime. People were extremely badly treated and assaulted by the gang. His comments reinforced the idea that this was not just a simple bank heist. It was a sophisticated and ruthless operation. The robbers had kidnapped bank employees and their families, holding them hostage to force compliance. It was a terrifying ordeal for those involved, making it clear that this was no Robin Hood-style theft, but a cold and calculated act. Despite the accusations, there was never enough concrete evidence to definitively prove IRA involvement. Scene Find remained firm in its denial, and the lack of arrests only deepened the mystery. On December 23, 2004, a Scene Find spokesman dismissed the accusation, saying, "This is a clearly orchestrated effort by the securocrats in the British system who are intent on wrecking the peace process." As time passed, the Northern Bank robbery became one of the most infamous crimes in Irish history. The stolen money was never fully recovered, and the case remains officially unsolved. More importantly, the heist exposed just how delicate Northern Ireland's path to peace was, highlighting the deep mistrust that still lingered between different political factions. While the robbery itself was a shocking event, its impact on the political landscape was even more profound. It tested the strength of the peace process and demonstrated how, even after the Good Friday Agreement, tensions and suspicion still ran deep. The Northern Bank robbery was more than just a crime. It was a moment that shaped the course of Northern Ireland's history in the years that followed. In the months following the robbery, police managed to recover some of the stolen cash, but it was only a fraction of the total amount taken. During raids in Cork and Dublin, officers found £2 million, including £60,000 in Northern banknotes. But the biggest surprise came when a stash of around $100,000 in U.S. banknotes was discovered in the most unlikely of places: the toilet of the Police Athletics Association New Forge Country Club. The PSNI confirmed that the cash had indeed been stolen during the Northern Bank heist, but they suspected it had been deliberately planted. According to their statement, the money was left there as a tactic to mislead detectives and divert their attention from more significant developments elsewhere in the case. This bizarre twist only added to the intrigue, raising even more questions about who was really behind the robbery and whether the true masterminds were still out there, watching as the investigation unfolded. While the true culprits remain at large, authorities have pursued individuals suspected of playing supporting roles in the crime. Among them was Ted Cunningham, a financial advisor from Farron, Cork County. Arrested in 2005, Cunningham was convicted of money laundering in 2009, though his conviction was overturned in 2012 due to legal technicalities. In a retrial in 2014, he was again found guilty. But he has consistently maintained his innocence, arguing that he was wrongfully implicated. In recent years, he has sought to clear his name, even considering taking his case to the European Court of Justice. Cunningham ultimately received a 5-year suspended sentence for laundering over £3 million from the stolen haul. However, this amount was just a fraction of the stolen millions, and he was never accused of direct involvement in the heist itself. Chris Ward, a Northern Bank employee, was the only individual to face trial in Northern Ireland. He was charged in connection with the robbery, but his case collapsed in 2008, leading to an acquittal. Over the years, authorities have made multiple arrests in an attempt to solve the case. In total, 20 people have been arrested, 13 in Northern Ireland and 7 in the Republic of Ireland. Despite these efforts, no one has been charged with actually carrying out the robbery, frustrating detectives who have spent years chasing leads. Only one man has been convicted in direct connection to the stolen money: Ted Cunningham, and even he was only found guilty of laundering less than £300,000. This means that the gang of mass robbers who physically carried out the daring crime has evaded justice to this day. One of the most significant developments in the case came when Dominic McAvoy, a 23-year-old from Kilcoe County Down, was charged with the robbery. He was accused of not only taking part in the heist, but also falsely imprisoning Kevin McMullen, a supervisor of the Northern Bank, and his wife Karen. McAvoy allegedly held them hostage as part of an elaborate scheme to access the bank's vaults. Additionally, he was charged with possessing a firearm or an imitation weapon during the crime. McAvoy was arrested at his home in Mulronda Park during a planned police operation, which also led to the detention of 5 other suspects. However, one of the arrested men, a 25-year-old, was later released without charge. 3 others remained in custody for questioning. The robbery has long been linked to the Irish Republic Army, a claim that the organization has strongly denied. Despite this, the authorities arrested Brian Authers, a senior Republican. Authers, 40, was taken into custody, while another suspect, 43, was detained in Queensland. Arthur's brother, Declan, was a known IRA member who was killed in a SAS ambush 18 years earlier. While police strongly suspected IRA involvement, no definitive proof has been established. Nearly 2 decades after the daring heist, the case remains unsolved. While authorities have made arrests and secured a few convictions for laundering the stolen money, they have never been able to charge anyone with actually planning or executing the robbery. The masked men who orchestrated the crime evaded security measures and vanished with £26.5 million are still out there, their identities a lingering mystery.